I was having a really hard time breathing in the hospital. My lungs felt heavy, like they were filled with water. I couldn't get enough air no matter how much I tried. My sister Thalassa came to my bed and grabbed the tube that was giving me oxygen. She yanked it off my face. "Stop faking it," she hissed. Her long, painted nails scratched my cheek a little as she pulled the tube. "You just want attention." Suddenly, all the air left my lungs. My chest felt like it was being crushed, like a soda can press down hard. I reached for the empty space where the tube had been, clawing at it, desperate for air. My vision blurred, black spots floated in front of my eyes, and my throat made sounds I didn't even recognize, like a scared animal trying to breathe. My parents were standing just a few feet away. They saw everything, but they didn't do anything. My mother crossed her arms, looking annoyed, and my father didn't even look up from his phone. I reached toward them, my hand shaking, silently begging, "Please help me. I'm your daughter too." Thalassa rolled her eyes. "See, she's fine. Just being dramatic, as always." What none of them knew was that someone was standing right behind them, watching everything. 2 weeks later, at our grandfather's will reading, that same man would put his hand on my sister's shoulder and say 6 words that would destroy her whole world. Have you ever been invisible? I know what it feels like to be invisible to the people who are supposed to love you the most. But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me where are you watching this from, and what time of day is it? My name is Lysandra Kane. I'm 35 years old. I work as a healthcare consultant. That means I help hospitals run better, save money, and take care of patients more safely. I live in Denver, own my own condo, and I manage my lung disease carefully, making sure to take my medicine and use oxygen when I need it. None of my family knew any of this because they never asked. I grew up feeling invisible in a family that only noticed my younger sister. When I was 8 and Thalassa was 2, I learned my job: to be strong, independent, and not ask for attention. Thalassa was delicate. She needed extra care. She needed protection from the world. I was expected to handle anything life threw at me without complaining because that's what older sisters do. Grandfather Oberon was the only one who ever really saw me. When I was 12, I was crying behind his tool shed because my parents had forgotten my birthday while taking Thalassa to her dance recital. He knelt down, wiped my tears with his rough hands, and said something I never forgot. "Lysandra, you are a gem hidden in darkness. One day the light will find you." I didn't understand it fully then, but now I think I'm starting to. 2 weeks ago, when grandfather died, I drove 4 hours from Denver to Colorado Springs for his funeral. I stayed in the back of the church while Thalassa cried dramatically in the front, surrounded by relatives giving her tissues and hugs. My mother told everyone that Thalassa had been such a comfort to Dad in his final days. They didn't tell anyone that I had called grandfather every Sunday for 15 years, talking about books, history, and life itself. I didn't know he was very sick until 3 days before he died. By the time I got there, he was gone. After the service, Thalassa cornered me near the coat closet. Her eyes were dry, even though she had cried in front of everyone. She leaned close, her perfume strong, and whispered with a fake smile. "Grandfather left everything to me, Lysandra. The house, the money, everything. You should get used to that." She patted my cheek like I was a child. Some of us were actually there for him. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I had called him every week for 15 years, but I said nothing. That was my role. The funeral, the grief, the high altitude from Denver. It all made my lungs worse. That night, at 2 a.m., I woke up gasping for air. My chest felt like iron bands were wrapped tightly around it. I called 911 and was rushed to St. Mary's Hospital. Doctors admitted me to the ICU and put me on oxygen. When my family arrived the next morning, I thought they would be worried. Instead, they were annoyed. "Lysandra, you always make everything complicated. We have the will reading to handle," my mom said, crossing her arms. My father was still looking at his phone. Thalassa checked her nails and probably thought I was faking it too. I tried to explain that COPD wasn't something you could pretend to have, that my oxygen levels were dangerously low, but my mom just said they'd come back later. Thalassa stayed behind. She said she'd keep me company. But as soon as my parents left, her face changed. She made sure no one else was around, then ripped the oxygen tube from my face again. That's when the door opened. Dr. Alistair Keller stood there, looking serious. He quickly reattached my oxygen and checked my vitals. Then he looked at Thalassa. "What did you just do?" he asked, his voice cold. Thalassa stammered. "The tube, it was loose." I saw a flash in Dr. Keller's eyes that told me he had seen this kind of cruelty before. He told Thalassa to leave immediately. She protested, saying it was a misunderstanding, but he didn't care. She finally grabbed her purse and left, muttering about ungrateful sisters. I lay there trembling. My throat hurts. My mind was full of questions I couldn't even form. Dr. Keller checked my vitals again, adjusted my oxygen, and told me to rest. Rest felt impossible. My own sister had tried to suffocate me. The next morning, after the doctors finished their rounds, my family was too busy with the estate to visit. Keller came back, pulled a chair close to my bed, and sat down. He looked tired, like he was carrying a heavy burden. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I told him the truth. Physically, I was okay. Emotionally, I was broken. He nodded like he understood more than he was saying. Then he told me something that changed everything. He said meeting me here wasn't an accident. He had known my grandfather for 5 years. Grandfather Oberon was his patient. They talked about family, regrets, and people they loved. My name comes up often. 3 years ago, Oberon asked Keller for a special favor. He wanted him to watch over me if I ever ended up at St. Mary's. He knew about my lungs. He knew I might come back to Colorado Springs. He wanted someone on my side. Lysandra is the granddaughter my family forgot. She has no one. If anything happens, please be there for her, Grandfather said. Keller didn't think this day would come, but it did when he saw my name on the hospital list. Then he handed me a folder. Oberon had given it to him 6 months ago to give to me at the right time. Inside were newspaper articles and clippings about me, about all my work in hospitals. One article talked about how I helped Denver Memorial Hospital avoid a financial disaster. Another featured an interview where I shared my ideas for making struggling hospitals better. On the margins, in handwriting I recognized from old birthday cards, Grandfather had written notes. My granddaughter did this. So proud of her. She built this life on her own. I cried. For 35 years, I thought no one noticed me, but Grandfather had always been watching. He collected proof of my achievements like treasures, even if he couldn't say it to me directly. Dr. Keller gave me a moment to collect myself. Then he looked serious again. "There's more you need to know," he said. He told me about Thalassa. She had made very bad money choices 2 years ago. She invested in a business that failed, leaving her almost $200,000 in debt. She hid it and used credit cards to keep up her lifestyle. Oberon found out when creditors called the house. Thalassa saw the inheritance as her only way out. She needed that money so badly she might do almost anything to get it. Now her cruelty made a new kind of sense. She wasn't just jealous. She was desperate. She saw me as standing between her and the money she wanted. Then a nurse came in. Her name was Coralie Vey. She was about 50 years old, with kind eyes and gray streaks in her hair. She checked my monitors and asked how I felt. Then she leaned close to Dr. Keller and said quietly, "I saw what happened yesterday. Your sister ripped the tube from her face and stood there watching." Keller asked if she would tell the truth about what she saw. She said yes. She had a 78-year-old mother at home and could never forgive anyone who did that to her mother. Then Coralie said something that made my blood run cold. She had worked at this hospital for over 20 years and remembered my grandfather. She remembered that night he died. Thalassa had come to visit late at 11 p.m., saying she wanted to spend quiet time alone with him. Coralie thought it was sweet. But 30 minutes later, the monitor started screaming. Grandfather had stopped breathing. Coralie rushed to call the emergency team, but it was too late. What scared her most was Thalassa's reaction. Most people scream or cry when someone dies. Thalassa just sat there calmly, watching the doctors work. She didn't panic, didn't cry, didn't even seem sad. Coralie said, "I thought it was strange even then, but I didn't say anything. I was too shocked." Later, I remembered that she didn't even call for help right away. She just watched. Hearing this, I felt a chill run down my spine. Thalassa's calmness that night wasn't normal. It wasn't like my sister at all. Coralie told me more about that night. She said that Thalassa stayed in the room a long time, long after the doctors had tried to save Grandfather. She didn't leave until morning. No one else was there with her, just her and Grandfather, and then he was gone. Hearing all of this made me realize something I had always known deep down. My family only saw what they wanted to see. They didn't notice me, but they also didn't really know Thalassa. She wasn't just spoiled or dramatic. She was desperate and dangerous when she thought someone could stop her from getting what she wanted. Dr. Keller looked at me and said, "Lysandra, you are not alone anymore. Your grandfather made sure of that. He left people watching out for you. You don't have to feel invisible." I felt a wave of relief and sadness all at once. For so long I thought my life didn't matter. I thought no one cared. But now I knew someone had always cared. My grandfather had. And now Dr. Keller and Corley were on my side too. I sat back in the hospital bed, breathing slowly through the oxygen tube, thinking about everything. About all the years I had spent invisible. About all the times I had been ignored, overlooked, or treated as if I didn't matter. About the times my sister had hurt me or tried to hurt me. And yet, I realized I had survived it all. I had built a life of my own. I had done everything on my own. And now I wasn't invisible anymore. Corley smiled at me. You're strong, Lysandra. Stronger than most people could ever be. And now no one is going to ignore you. Dr. Keller nodded. Your grandfather trusted me to protect you. And I will. You're not alone. Not now, not ever. Tears ran down my cheeks again, but this time they were different. These were tears of relief, and finally, a little bit of happiness. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Thalassa would probably keep trying to get what she wanted. My parents might never change. But I also knew that I had people on my side now. People who cared, who would act, and who would protect me if things got dangerous. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt safe. When Corley checked the equipment during the chaos, she noticed something wasn't right. The breathing tube wasn't in the right place. It hadn't been completely removed, but it had shifted just enough to make it hard for someone to breathe. Corley knew this could be dangerous, so she immediately told her supervisor. But nothing happened. No one investigated. Old people sometimes move around in their sleep, her supervisor said. Equipment shifts. Things like this happen. Corley paused and looked at me with tired eyes. She said she didn't have direct proof of anything. She couldn't accuse anyone based on what she had seen. But she knew in her heart that something was wrong. And it wasn't just her, my grandfather knew it too. Earlier that week, after Thalassa's first visit to see him, he had asked the nurses to contact his lawyer. He had changed his will just 3 days before he died. I turned to Keller, my grandfather's doctor, and asked the question I had been holding inside me for so long. Will Thalassa ever face charges for what she might have done to grandfather? Keller was honest. He said probably not. There wasn't concrete evidence. No one had seen what happened in that exact moment. The breathing tube could be explained away as an accident. Thalassa would deny everything. Without proof, no prosecutor would touch the case. But Keller reminded me of something very important. My grandfather had known something was wrong. That was why he changed his will. That was why he had prepared for the possibility that Thalassa might go too far. I lay there thinking about everything for the first time. I didn't feel sad or defeated. I didn't feel hurt. I felt angry. A cold, sharp anger that cleared my thoughts instead of clouding them. I didn't want revenge in the courts. I didn't want to spend years fighting battles I couldn't win. What I wanted was the truth. I wanted my family to see what they had allowed to happen. I wanted them to see what they had chosen to ignore for so many years. I looked at Keller and Corley and asked them directly, "Will you help me? Will you stand with me when the time comes?" Keller nodded without hesitation. Corley reached over and squeezed my hand. She said she would be honored to help. The next day, my family showed up at the hospital, demanding that I check out early. My mother complained about the expense. My father muttered about conflicts with the lawyer and Thalassa. And Thalassa herself acted sweeter than she had in years. She sat on the edge of my hospital bed and said she was so worried about me. She told me I should go home and rest before reading. She even offered to make me soup. I looked into her eyes and saw the truth. She was pretending. She was scared, not of me, but of losing control of the situation for the first time in her life. I didn't bend. I didn't apologize. I didn't make myself smaller to keep the peace. I told her I would leave the hospital only when my doctor said I was ready, and not a moment sooner. Something flickered across her face, maybe confusion, maybe the first hint of fear. She wasn't used to me standing up to her. 2 days later, I was discharged. I was strong enough to walk on my own. I could breathe without help. Before I left, Keller handed me a sealed envelope. He said my grandfather had given it to him months ago, with instructions that I should only receive it when I truly needed it. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note from my grandfather. It said, "Lysandra, you are the only one in this family with a kind heart. Don't let them steal that from you." I read those words 3 times, feeling his love reach me even though he was gone. He had known what was coming. He had made sure I wouldn't face it alone. The will reading was scheduled for 10 in the morning at Lucien Frost's law office downtown. When I arrived, my parents and Thalassa were already there, seated and looking impatient and entitled. The door opened and I walked in, but I wasn't alone. Behind me were Dr. Alistair Keller and Nurse Coralie Vey. Thalassa's face turned white. She demanded to know why I had brought strangers to a private family matter. Her voice was sharp, but I could hear the tremor underneath. She was scared. Lucien Frost, the lawyer, answered before I could. He explained that Oberon had specifically requested Keller and Coralie be there. It was not my idea. This was my grandfather's final wish. Reed asked everyone to sit down. He was a tall man with silver hair, glasses perched on his nose, and he carried himself with the weight of someone who had seen many family secrets over the decades. He began reading the will. Oberon had been very specific. He wanted all family members present. He wanted witnesses. And he wanted certain truths to come out before the estate was distributed. Thalassa sat with her arms crossed, confident that she would get her way. My parents exchanged nervous glances. Clearly, they were unsettled by Keller and Coralie's presence. Reed opened the first document. He read, "The main house, valued at about $800,000, would be divided equally among 3 people. Unia Dorian Kane, and Lysandra Kane." Thalassa's name was not mentioned. She jumped to her feet. "There must be a mistake. Grandfather promised me the house. He told me I would be taken care of." Reed looked at her calmly over his glasses. "Please sit down," he said. "There is more to come." Thalassa lowered herself back into her chair, but her fists were clenched. Her confidence had started to crack. Reed then turned to Keller and invited him to speak. My parents looked confused, but Thalassa's face went pale. Keller spoke steadily and clearly. He explained that he had been Oberon Kane's physician for 5 years. During that time, Oberon had confided in him about the family, his worries, and his hopes. Oberon had specifically asked Keller to watch over me if I ever needed medical care. He said I was the granddaughter the family had forgotten, and he wanted someone in my corner. Then Keller described what he had witnessed 3 days ago. He had walked into my hospital room and found Thalassa standing over my bed. She had just ripped the breathing tube from my face. I was choking, gasping for air, and she simply stood there watching. Keller intervened immediately and saved my life. He looked directly at Thalassa as he spoke. She could not meet his eyes. Coralie stood next. Her voice was quieter but just as steady. She confirmed she had been at the doorway and had witnessed the entire incident. She saw Thalassa remove my breathing tube. She saw that Thalassa made no attempt to call for help. Then Coralie said something that made my mother gasp. She explained she had also been on duty the night grandfather died. She described how Thalassa had arrived late, insisted on being alone with grandfather, and closed the door. 30 minutes later, the monitors were alarmed. When Coralie rushed in, she found the breathing tube displaced and Thalassa sitting calmly by the window with no sign of panic. Thalassa screamed that they were lying. She said it was a conspiracy. She said I had paid them to destroy her reputation. Reed raised his hand and called for silence. He produced a folder containing hallway camera footage from the hospital and nursing notes documenting the displaced equipment. The evidence was clear. Keller stood again and walked slowly toward Thalassa. The room fell completely silent. He placed his hand on the table directly in front of her and leaned close. Then he spoke 6 words that seemed to stop time. "I saw what you did, Thalassa." She froze like a deer caught in headlights. Keller continued without breaking eye contact. He said it wasn't just what she did to me, it was what she did to grandfather too. Reed opened a second envelope. It was a letter from Oberon written specifically for Thalassa to be read only at this gathering. He began reading aloud. "Thalassa, I loved you the wrong way. I loved you with silence and false hope. I thought if I gave you enough, you would learn to love others, but I was wrong. I don't know exactly what you did, but I know what you didn't do. You didn't love your sister. You didn't respect me. You only ever saw what you could take. If you are reading this letter, it means you still haven't changed. I hope someday you'll understand that love cannot be bought and forgiveness cannot be demanded." Thalassa broke down, but not in remorse. She screamed that it wasn't fair. She said she deserved that money. She said grandfather had no right to judge her. My mother tried to defend her. Keller cut her off. He asked my parents directly if they had known about Thalassa's problems for years. The silence that followed was answer enough. Finally, my father spoke. His voice was broken. "We thought if we loved Thalassa enough, she would eventually change," he said. I found my voice at last. "What about me?" I asked. Didn't I deserve to be loved too? Neither of them could answer. Reed cleared his throat and opened the final envelope. This one was for me personally, in my grandfather's handwriting. He read aloud the details of my grandfather's final gift. My grandfather had left me the mountain retreat house in Estes Park, a beautiful property worth $400,000. It was a place where I could finally breathe freely, away from the family that had suffocated me for so long. He had also established a healthcare trust fund of $150,000 specifically for my medical treatment, so I would never have to worry about affording care for my lungs. And he had left me his entire rare book collection, the same worn volumes we had read together as a child, spending summer afternoons in his study, escaping into worlds where daughters were treasured and families actually loved each other. The room was frozen in stunned silence. Thalassa looked like she might collapse. Her face had gone from white to gray, almost green. Her hands gripped the armrests so tightly that her knuckles protruded. My parents stared at the floor, fascinated by the carpet pattern, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the gentle ticking of the antique clock on Reed's bookshelf, counting the seconds of their shame. Reed reached into his folder once more and produced one final envelope, addressed to me personally. I accepted it with trembling fingers. The paper felt fragile and precious, like holding a piece of grandfather himself. I opened it carefully, not wanting to tear it. Inside was a letter, in my grandfather's familiar handwriting, slightly shaky from age but unmistakable. My dearest Lysandra, you are the gem hidden in darkness that I spoke of so many years ago when you were just a sad little girl, crying behind my tool shed. I have watched you grow into an extraordinary woman, despite everything working against you, and my heart has swelled with pride at every achievement you earned through your own determination. I am sorry I didn't protect you sooner. I am sorry I didn't stand up to your parents and demand they treat you fairly. I was old and afraid to confront my children about how they had failed you. I told myself that keeping the peace was more important than speaking the truth. I convinced myself that things would get better on their own. I was wrong. Through this will, I want you to finally know what I should have said out loud every single day of your life. I always saw you, Lysandra. I was always proud of you. Even when life was hard, you made it beautiful. You faced many problems and challenges, but you did it with kindness, bravery, and strength. Your sister will never understand how strong and special you are. Now it is time to live for yourself. Don't try to make anyone else happy. Don't try to get their approval. Don't hope that your family will finally love you the way you deserve. The light has finally found you, Lysandra. Step into it. Walk into it with your head held high, and never look back. I love you forever and always, your grandfather who loved you very much. When I read these words, I couldn't stop crying. The tears fell onto the paper, blurring some of the words. But I didn't care. I didn't care at all. For 35 years, I believed I was invisible. I believed my family didn't care about me. I believed I was not important and not worthy of love. For 35 years, I worked harder than anyone else. I achieved more than anyone else. I asked for less than anyone else. I hoped that someday someone would notice me. That someday someone would see me and tell me I mattered. And now, in my hands, I held proof that someone had seen me. Someone had loved me. Someone had been proud of me all along. My grandfather. He had collected articles about my work. He had written little notes in the margins telling me he admired me. And he had found a way to tell me everything I needed to hear, even though he had died. Even though death had taken his voice, he had left me his words. Reed gave me a moment to calm down before speaking to the room again. His voice became serious and official, like a teacher explaining a very important lesson. He explained that, because of the reports from Dr. Keller and Nurse Vey, I had very strong reasons to take Thalassa to court. She had hurt me. The evidence was clear and well documented. I could also report it to the police, and they might investigate and press criminal charges. The hospital had kept camera footage in the hallway. They had nursing notes and other official records. There were also 2 trustworthy witnesses. The case against Thalassa was very strong. Thalassa completely lost her calm. She jumped from her chair and ran to me. She fell to her knees like she was begging before a queen. She grabbed my hands, and I tried to pull away, but she held on tightly. She begged me not to take any action against her. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't mean any of it. She said she had been under so much stress with money problems that she hadn't been thinking clearly. She said we were sisters. She said the family was supposed to forgive each other. She asked me to think about what pressing charges would do to our parents. She asked me to think about our family's reputation. She even asked me to think about the memory of my grandfather. Tears ran down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. For a moment she almost looked sincere. I let her speak. I let her say every excuse she could think of. I let her use every trick she knew. Then I gently pulled my hands away. I told her my answer. I said I would not sue her. I would not press charges. I would not take any legal action against her. Her eyes lit up. She started thanking me. But I raised my hand to stop her. I wanted her to understand something very important. I explained that my choice was not about forgiveness. It was not about kindness. It was not about sisterly love. I chose not to take legal action because I refused to carry anger and resentment toward her anymore. She had already taken too much from me. She had taken my childhood peace. She had taken my sense of belonging. She had taken 35 years of believing I was not worthy of love. She would not take my future peace too. I would not give her that power. I also made something else very clear. From that day forward, Thalassa was no longer my sister. I wanted no contact with her. No phone calls. No text messages. No holiday gatherings. No pretending we were family when we were not. She was a stranger to me now, and that is how she would remain for the rest of our lives. She would have to deal with her $200,000 debt all on her own. She would have to explain to our aunts, uncles, and cousins why grandfather had removed her from his will. She would have to live every day knowing that the people in the room now knew exactly who she was and what she could do. Those were her consequences. They would follow her like shadows for the rest of her life. Unlike a lawsuit that might end after a few years, these consequences would never go away. Thalassa stared at me. I saw hatred and despair in her eyes. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She had finally run out of tricks. She stumbled back to her chair and collapsed into it, broken in a way I had never seen before. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Just a calm emptiness where the pain and anger had lived for so many years. My parents tried to speak next. My mother leaned forward with wet eyes. She said she didn't know things were so bad between Thalassa and me. She said she was sorry. She said she loved both her daughters equally. She said she had always tried her best. I looked at her for a long time. I told her the truth. I told her she had always known. Every time Thalassa made fun of me, she said nothing. Every time my accomplishments were ignored while Thalassa's little efforts were celebrated, she knew. Every time I asked for help and was told to handle it myself, she knew. She simply chose not to act. Acting would have meant confronting Thalassa, and confronting Thalassa was something she had never been willing to do. My mother had no answer. She just sat there with tears running down her cheeks. She finally faced the truth she had spent decades avoiding. My father cleared his throat. He asked if I could ever forgive them. His voice cracked on the question. I thought carefully before answering. I told him I needed time. Maybe a very long time. Maybe years. I wasn't cutting them off completely like I was with Thalassa, but I was setting clear boundaries that should have existed decades ago. If they wanted me in their life, they would have to prove it through consistent actions, not just empty words. They would have to earn back the trust they had spent 35 years destroying. Whether they could, I didn't know yet. 3 months later, I moved into my grandfather's mountain house. The house sat on a forested hill, looking over the Rocky Mountains. It was surrounded by tall pine trees and fresh, clean air. My lungs, which had been hurt and weak, welcomed the air like a gift. Every morning, I woke to birds singing and the wind rustling the branches. No traffic. No sirens. Just peace. Every evening, I watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold, red, and purple. It was beautiful. I set up grandfather's books in the study exactly as he had kept them, alphabetized by author, his favorites on the shelf closest to the reading chair. I could almost feel him there, nodding in approval. I began writing, not to get revenge, not to expose my family, not to punish anyone. I wrote a memoir about my journey. I wanted other women to know they weren't alone. Women who had been forgotten by their families. Women who had spent their lives feeling invisible. Women who had been told they were too sensitive or too dramatic, when all they wanted was the same love freely given to others. Women who needed to know survival was possible. If my story could help even one woman find the courage to leave toxic relationships, then everything I had suffered would have meaning. Keller became a trusted friend during those months. We met for coffee once a month. He told me stories about grandfather I had never heard. How Oberon worried about me. How he asked Keller questions about lung problems and treatments. How he talked about my accomplishments with pride. How he spent his final years quietly protecting me even after he was gone. Those conversations helped me heal in ways I hadn't expected. They gave me back pieces of my grandfather that death had tried to steal. One quiet afternoon in early autumn, I stood on the balcony watching the last golden light fade behind the mountains. I held grandfather's favorite book in my hands, a worn collection of poetry he had read to me when I was small. The world still seemed full of possibilities. I opened it carefully to the first page and found a note I had never noticed before. Written in his handwriting from 20 years ago, when I was just 15. For Lysandra, my strong little girl. Someday you will understand your own worth. I smiled for the first time in my 35 years. I think I finally did. My phone rang, breaking the peaceful silence. It was Coralie. I answered, and her warm voice said she had just spoken with a journalist from a major women's magazine. The journalist didn't want gossip or scandal. She wanted to share my story as a message of hope. A light for other women who had been made invisible by their families. Coralie asked if I wanted to talk to her. I looked at the mountains my grandfather loved. The mountains he had given me so I could finally breathe freely without my family's indifference crushing me. Give her my number, I said. The light had found me at last. I was ready to share it with the world. And so Lysandra's story ends, but it is also a beginning. She spent 35 years thinking she was invisible and not enough. But she learned that the one person who truly mattered had always seen her. Her grandfather had collected proof of her accomplishments like treasures. When he knew he was running out of time, he made sure to leave her not just money, but something even more valuable. The knowledge that she had always been worthy of love. Lysandra chose grace over revenge. She could have destroyed Thalassa in court. She could have pressed charges. But she understood something Thalassa never would. Revenge keeps you chained to the person who hurt you. Forgiveness, even when it's undeserved, is the key that sets you free. Lysandra didn't forgive Thalassa because she earned it. She let go of the burden because she refused to carry it anymore. And in doing so, she finally stepped into the light her grandfather had promised would find her. This story is for every woman who has ever felt invisible in her family. For every daughter who worked twice as hard and got half the recognition. For every sister who was expected to be strong while someone else could be fragile. For every woman who looked around the table and wondered why her achievements were never celebrated. You are not alone. Your feelings are valid. Your worth is not defined by whether your family sees it. I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible in your family? Have you loved someone who couldn't love you back the way you needed? Have you had to walk away from people who should have protected you to protect yourself? Please share your story. Thousands of women are watching who need to know they are not the only ones who have felt this way. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is say, "Me too," and let someone else know they are not alone in their pain. If Lysandra's journey touched your heart, consider subscribing to this channel. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about women who overcome impossible problems, women who find their strength, women who finally learn to love themselves after a lifetime of being unloved by others. When you subscribe and turn on notifications, you become part of a community of women supporting women, lifting each other up, and reminding each other that our worth is not defined by those who fail to see it. Please take a moment to hit the like button if this story moved you. That simple action helps more women find these stories when they need them most. Share this video with someone you love, someone who might need to hear that they too are a hidden gem waiting for the light to find them.